Then porpoising became a new buzzword for F1 fans and journalists all around the world. Though hardly a new term, it hasn't been used in the context of the F1 paddock for almost 40 years. However, it's now back into spotlight, causing the likes of Hamilton and Russell to genuinely struggle to get the car to pace. So what exactly is porpoising and why did no one talk about it last year? The answer lies in the change of regulations governing the construction of the F1 cars. The 2022 season is the first one in which cars are constructed according to new rules that were aimed at increasing the quality of races. The goal was to allow the cars to follow each other more closely, especially in corners. This results in more wheel-to-wheel action and an overall improved racing experience for the spectators. Judging by the opening rounds of this year's Grand Prix, the goal was achieved with flying colors. It has been possible by reducing the dependency on front and rear wings to provide downforce, allowing the cars to utilize the so-called ground effect instead. This is the key difference between this and the previous generation of F1 cars. Therefore, in order to understand porpoising, we need to understand the ground effect first. Generally speaking, the ground effect is a method of generating downforce by harvesting the airflow under the car's floor. It was introduced to motorsport in the 1960s and produced some of the most radical designs, which were ultimately banned due to their ever-growing cornering speed and the resulting concerns about drivers' safety. It was therefore banned from F1 car designs from 1983 to 2021. During this time period, the FIA rules mandated the car floor to be flat. The resulting underflow airflow is rather bland, but from 2022 onwards the floor can finally be curved, allowing the ground effect to appear. So how does it really work then? To explain it, let's look at a 2022 F1 car from the side. To visualize what's going on, let's get rid of the side pods so that we have a clear view of the floor. As the air enters the underbody, it does so through a relatively large opening in the front. However, the floor starts to curve towards the ground further back, so the air must pass through an area with a significantly smaller cross-section before it is finally allowed to escape at the back of the car, again through a fairly large opening. Although air is a compressible substance, a property utilized all over the motorsport industry, when it flows around the car at speeds encountered in F1, it acts like an incompressible fluid, pretty much like water. Therefore, if the air is to make a journey under the F1 car's convex floor, through an area that's called a Venturi tunnel, the decrease in the cross-section must be accompanied by an increase in the flow speed. This, in turn, decreases the pressure under the car, in turn creating a net downward acting force, allowing the car to corner faster. When this downforce is generated, it has the same effect on the suspension as putting more weight into the car. In turn, the suspension gets compressed, which changes the position of the car floor relative to the ground, either by moving them closer together or rotating the car up, down, or a combination of the two. The exact effect depends on how the underbody is exactly shaped. Generally speaking, a more symmetrical shape will cause less car rotation and vice versa. The important thing is that those changes also change the conditions in which the air flows. Sometimes, especially at high speeds, those changes can be so dramatic that the airflow itself is interrupted, either by the ride height getting so low that the flow gets choked, or by separating from the underbody at some point. In turn, downforce is reduced and the suspension decompresses, restoring the initial flow conditions, allowing it to flow uninterrupted once again, and the cycle repeats, causing an oscillating up and down movement of the car called porpoising. It has a detrimental effect on the car's performance and competitiveness by decreasing handling and top speed. Moreover, in extreme cases, it can cause total disintegration of the car if the porpoising frequency is close to the natural oscillation frequency of some of the car's components. The question on how to get rid of porpoising is definitely not an easy one and continues to cause the engineering powerhouses involved in F1 a fair bit of trouble. However, we could distinguish two approaches to solving the problem, either by altering the suspension settings or the car's aerodynamics. Let's start with suspension first. The easiest thing is to increase the stiffness of the suspension so that the ride height is less affected by the change in downforce. Although it's really low-hanging fruit, it can actually be quite a poisonous one. Suspension stiffness can only be increased so much before ride quality becomes compromised. Too much of it, and a car's ability to respond to imperfections in the track while keeping a steady course is greatly diminished. If you've ever ridden a go-kart, you know what I'm talking about. Factoring in the speed at which F1 car can go around a corner, it is easy to imagine the dangers of hitting a curb in a car with a rock-hard suspension. Moreover, it adversely affects the driver's comfort and puts more stress on other components, which can negatively impact their reliability and longevity. The second possibility to address porpoising is to increase the suspension damping power, that is, how much resistance suspension elements offer when moved around. However, too much damping results in sluggish suspension and again impedes the car's performance. But before we even get to that, there's an even greater problem. Let's call it a porpoising damper, would need to withstand significantly higher forces than normal suspension dampers. In turn, it would need to be substantially more massive, which would add to the mass of the car, trading straight line problems for reduced cornering ability. Porpoising can also be reduced by increasing the ride height. That way, even if the suspension gets compressed as a result of downforce, the floor does not come close enough to the ground to stall the underbody airflow. Unfortunately, this also reduces the performance of the underbody venturi tunnels. The downforce gets bigger as the ride height gets smaller, so increasing ride height negates some of the benefits of the ground effect. It might be the only viable option though, and still better than experiencing porpoising at full swing. This is where active suspension could enter the scene. Using an automated system to keep the ride height at the desired level based, among other things, on speed and acceleration would result in an optimal underbody airflow and therefore downforce generation irrespective of the conditions. It's a technology that has been tried before both on the track and outside of it, in cars such as Citroën DX or Xantia more than half a century ago. Hardly a new take by any measure. Unfortunately though, FIA banned its usage in the early 90s as a part of the so-called driver's aid package, and is reluctant to revert this decision, but with some drivers voicing support for this technology, we might witness its return to the F1 world. If suspension tricks are not enough to bring porpoising to acceptable levels, changes in the car's aerodynamics have to be made. This is obviously a more expensive and labor-intensive option, requiring a significant amount of CFD or computational fluid dynamics simulations, aerodynamic tunnel testing, and manufacturing of new components. It is especially painful for teams in the 2022 seasons due to the budget caps and limits on how much CFD simulation and wind tunnel testing a team can actually perform. Keeping that in mind, what can be done to address the bouncing problem? The general answer is to redesign the profiles of the venturi tunnels so that they are less prone to stalling or stall in a more controlled fashion. For instance, different parts of the underbody could stall gradually as the floor nears the ground, akin to how an aircraft wing stalls gradually as it's pulling its nose up. That could either eliminate the problem altogether or at least make it less pronounced, but this is a topic for another video. Regardless of how the teams will solve the porpoising problem, one thing remains certain. This up till now obscured effect has already disrupted the balance of power established in the previous seasons and will definitely be a talking point of 2021 in the races to come. Thanks for watching, have a nice day.